Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 1st of August 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So it was Ethereum's 7th birthday over the weekend. So Ethereum was, born, or the Ethereum mainnet went live July 30th, 2015. So it was obviously July 30th over the weekend, and it turned 7. You know, it's kind of funny when you think about the fact that Ethereum is only 7 and it's as big as it is, right? If you like, a lot of people like to compare Ethereum and crypto and blockchains more generally to, the evolution of the internet. Well, the first iterations of the internet came out in like the 40s or 50s. I mean, it depends how far you want to go back. If we go back to ARPANET, I believe, if I quickly Google that because I don't want to get this wrong, I think ARPANET was established, in 1969, right? And then we didn't really get, consumers really using the internet till the 90s, so it was quite a while. Like, it was probably a good 20 something years until consumers were really, using the internet and getting value out of it. But then probably even more than that, 1969, 70 to 2000 is 30 years, and then 35, 40 years until kind of it really went exponential, you could say, after the kind of like .com crash and everything like that. But that, I think, was due to the fact that the internet needed a major infrastructure rollout to actually happen. And, the hardware needed to kind of like get better and better over time for the experiences to become seamless for people and all that sort of stuff there, right? Like, you need to build internet towers and everything like that. And lay the cable, of course, as well. Whereas with crypto, I mean, it's been around since Bitcoin came out in 2000, 8/9, right? So you could say around 14 years at this point, right? So I mean, if you take Bitcoin, it's been like a little while, but it hasn't actually been that long. And there are plenty of people who are using it. I mean, there are more people using kind of like crypto today, and I would probably. So that's the thing. When you think about like people using crypto, it's kind of more about, okay, are they buying just coins on exchanges or are they actually on chain? I think on chain is very, very low compared to people that's buying coins on exchanges, but there is obviously like a kind of double-edged sword there, right? Do you count people buying on exchanges? Well, then you kind of say, oh, well, crypto has massive adoption. But then that doesn't really, because you look at on-chain and there's hardly kind of like anyone. I mean, you could say there's probably like 5, maybe 10% of people that buy on exchanges actually do stuff on-chain. So there's all that to consider. But, if you just kind of like consider the fact that the industry is still so incredibly young, yet it's achieved so much already and it has such a large market cap, like even after the massive downturn that we've seen, the whole industry is still worth $1 trillion, right? Like over $1 trillion. Ethereum is still a $200+ billion network alone in just 7 years, which is crazy to me. I absolutely think it's crazy. I think what's even crazier is that Ethereum is like a totally new thing, right? It's not like some kind of like app that people can just download on their phone and away they go with it or anything like that. It's a totally new thing that requires like different kind of levels of thinking. It's definitely nowhere near finished. I mean, Vitalik said in his ETHCC talk that he considers Ethereum to be about 40%, I think, finished, which obviously that means we're not even halfway over finished yet. Yet we have so much kind of like adoption, such a large community, and so many people kind of involved with it, which I think is really, really cool. But still, like a lot of obviously growth potential to go. So yeah, 7 years. What's Ethereum going to be like in 7 years from now? I don't know. Like I feel like Ethereum 7 years from now, if we hit all the roadmap items that we want to, we'd pretty much be at the kind of like splurge, which is the last part of the roadmap, which is the nice to haves essentially. We'd pretty much be there. I think we would have done all the other phases, or all the other things would have been implemented already in 7 years' time. Now, hopefully I'm not jinxing it. Hopefully it doesn't take longer than that. But yeah, just thinking about the kind of like craziness that has gone and where Ethereum has come from, where it is today, and where it's going is really exciting. So I do think that, if you take like that 40% kind of finished kind of, statistic there, then you kind of like apply it out. We do another 40% in 7 years, maybe another 50% in 7 years, and we get to like 90% complete, and that 10% is the last kind of like nice to haves of Ethereum. Well, then it's probably kind of like makes a lot of sense there. So yeah. Anyway, I obviously have a lot to kind of like thank Ethereum for, thank the community for. I kind of like always do that. Whenever it's Ethereum's birthday, I just kind of like do a bit of reflection and be like, wow, Ethereum really did change my life. And I hope it changed your lives, and I hope it is changing your life. It's just so amazing that it's a technology at the end of the day, right? It is not a living thing, but it feels like it's a living thing sometimes because of the people that make up that technology. And it feels like we're part of like a living, breathing kind of organism that is Ethereum, even though it's kind of like a physical network grounded in kind of like machines. It still has a lot of human elements to it, as I've discussed obviously at length before in the refuel. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of like talk a little bit about the Ethereum's birthday there. I guess like 1 year till its next birthday from here, right? All right, so speaking of Ethereum upgrades, the Görli merge is fast approaching. I mean, today is the 1st of August, so between the 6th and 12th is when we're expecting the Görli merge, but you can now track the progress of it by heading to the Bordel.wtf website. Now, those of you that have been tracking the other testnet merges will be familiar with this website. Nothing new here. You've got the TTD in the top left. You did have the hash rate below this, but Görli isn't a proof of work network. It's a POA network. It's a proof of authority. So it works differently. There's no kind of like hash, but it kind of like it can produce blocks or kind of like it has a concept of difficulty based on, I think, the validators that are part of the POA network. And if some of them kind of like fall off, well then the difficulty changes or something like that. I'm not totally across the details there, but there is a similar element. So that's why you only see the TTD here and not any kind of like any hash rate below it. But according to this site right now, we should be expecting the merge to happen around August 11th at 11 p.m. I think that would be in UTC time, 11 p.m. UTC, I think, or closer to 12 a.m. UTC there. So yeah, it's probably going to happen. Like, I don't know why they said 6th to 12th of August. Maybe they were just given like the widest band as possible, but I would expect, between 10th and 12th, really. I don't really expect it to happen earlier than that. I mean, I hope it doesn't happen earlier than that because I might not be able to make the live stream. It's actually my anniversary with my fiance on the 8th of August. So let's make sure it happens on like the 11th, not the 8th, guys, for my sake. I want that PO-up for being on the call. But yeah, you can kind of like go to this website yourself to keep track of everything happening here. Maybe it'll happen sooner, maybe it'll happen later. We'll see how that evolves, but we're very, very close. Only about 10 days away, I guess you could say, 10-ish days. And then it's mainnet, guys. So close that we could have an Ethereum merge mainnet in 6 to 7 weeks from now if it happens in mid to late September, which I still think is a pretty good kind of chance. Haven't seen any chatter about delaying that date or anything like that. I think once we see Görli go through, and if it goes through well, if everything goes like it did for Ropsten and Sepolia, I don't think there's going to be any kind of like pushback or anything from any of the developers or researchers. It's basically going to be like, okay, it's go time. Let's schedule this. Let's give a TTD. Let's target mid to late September or that week of September 19th, as they kind of like said on the call a few weeks ago. And let's get this thing done. So close, guys. I can't wait. But yeah, definitely check out this site if you want to keep a close eye on the Görli merge timing. All right, so I've been talking about EIP 4844 a lot lately. Over the weekend, I put out a few tweets about this, basically saying that post-merge, I'm going to shift my shilling from shilling the merge to shilling EIP 4844. And a refresher, I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but the refresher for you guys is that 4844 is proto-dank sharding. It is an EIP that, I think, if EIP 1559 was the biggest and most anticipated EIP in Ethereum's history, I think 4844 should be just as big, if not bigger than it, because of the fact that 1559 was awesome. It is awesome. It did a lot of good for the network. Obviously, we're burning ETH. We're kind of like we stopped leaking that value to everyone. We actually kind of like bring a lot of that value back in-house and flows to ETH. But on top of that, we also kind of like smoothened out the fee market, made kind of like priority inclusion a lot better, and a bunch of different kind of like things that are definitely paying dividends for users. Whereas 4844, I think, is going to have a much bigger impact for end users than 1559 did. Even though 1559 smoothened out the fee market, 4844, as I've mentioned before, makes roll-ups incredibly cheap, like sub-cent transaction fees, and it actually shifts the burden of scale from the Ethereum layer 1 to the roll-ups themselves. And then what do I mean by that? Basically what I mean is that you saw what happened with Arbitrum. They got congested because they have that artificial limit in place during the Odyssey event, and the transaction fees spiked. Now, both Optimism and Arbitrum today are not at capacity, but their transaction fees are still not sub-cent, right? Like if I go to l2fees.info right now, both Optimism and Arbitrum cost around 20-25 cents to send ETH and about 30 to 40 cents to swap tokens at around a 10 Gwei gas price. And that is mostly, if not, all layer 1 gas costs, because of the fact that L2 settlement to layer 1 is still too expensive. Now with EIP 4844, it introduces a new transaction type on layer 1 called blob carrying transaction type. And this is purely part of the consensus layer, and that basically gives rollups. This can only be used by rollups, basically, and layer 2s. It basically gives them space to store all this data, and that's taking up the space on layer 1 Ethereum, and then it expires after a month. It's still kind of like part of the chain, but the kind of like details, so to speak, expire. And then if you wanted those details, you can download them and store them yourselves and everything like that. You can verify the correctness of them because all the hashes and stuff are still on chain. But yeah, that's basically what it is. So those costs would collapse down to, at current demand levels, down to sub-cent transaction fees. But if demand starts spiking, if the rollups themselves start hitting their own limits that they've got in place, well, then their fees are obviously going to go up again. Doesn't matter how cheap it is for them to post data on layer 1 Ethereum, they're still bound by their own constraints. So that's why I've always said that layer 2s kind of like get the best and the worst of layer 1 and layer 2, right? Like they've got the limitations and the pros of each thing there. They get the security, decentralization of Ethereum layer 1, and kind of like get to outsource all that stuff to L1, but they also inherit the L1's lack of scalability as it exists today, but to an extent, not to the extent that L1 has its scalability issues, but definitely it still exists. Whereas post Danksharding, that kind of like goes away for a little while. It'll obviously still not give us infinite scaling or anything like that, but it will give us a lot for a while. And then what ends up happening is that the burden shifts back to the rollup. So it's kind of like a balancing act where the L1 will scale, then the rollups will have to scale to match that L1 scale. And then, that maybe those rollups get filled up because they have so much scale, and then they hit their limits. Okay, well then they scale further, and then L1 has to scale more. And we have obviously plans on both layers to scale as much as we can, but that's the balancing act that we're going to be playing with over the next few years. And on top of that, you also have a kind of like these upgrades coming, which I think, I don't know if I have a tweet about these upgrades here. I think I do, yeah. Both Arbitrum, Nitro, and Optimism Bedrock, which are the two major upgrades coming to Arbitrum and Optimism respectively, that are going to increase scalability of these systems. Now, I don't know how much Bedrock is going to increase the scalability of Optimism. I think for Nitro and Arbitrum, it's about 10x what it is today. So Arbitrum will be able to handle 10x the demand it saw, I guess, like when it peaked during Odyssey. But then if it reaches that capacity, well, it's going to kind of like revert back to what we already saw. Now, obviously, Nitro isn't the final upgrade. They're going to keep putting upgrades in. They're going to keep doing more and more here. And then with those L1 upgrades coming with proto-danksharding and things like that, that's also going to happen. But as I said, like, it's a balancing act. It's kind of like shifting to the different layers depending on where we are in kind of like the in the scaling ecosystem there. And finally, before I move on from this, I just wanted to highlight that Proto-Lambda, there's one of the halves of Proto-Danksharding. So for those of you who don't know, Proto-Danksharding, the term, is actually made up of two people's names. Proto-Lambda here on Twitter, who has been an Ethereum researcher for a long time. He's currently at Optimism, Optimism Labs, working on Optimism and still working on Ethereum core stuff. And Dankred Feist, who works at the Ethereum Foundation, who came up with Danksharding. Well, Proto and Dankred came up with proto-danksharding, which is basically I guess you could say, really early version of danksharding that still gives us a lot of benefits, gives rollups a lot of benefits. Well, he posted the slides here from his ETC talk about 4844. So if you want just like a clean overview of it, you can go check that out. But there's also the EIP44 website, which you should just Google and you'll be able to check that out as well. I suggest getting familiar with EIP44 as familiar as you can. Dedicate time to kind of like researching it, going through the FAQ, going through everything to make sure you understand it and what benefits it brings, because you're going to be hearing a lot more about it, not only from me, but from everyone after the merge, because that is the thing to look forward to after the merge. Like, yeah, we have beacon chain withdrawals coming and things like that, but no one's excited about beacon chain withdrawals. I mean, it's just a thing, right? It's just a thing we have to do because it's part of like the whole kind of like staking ecosystem. We have to have a way for people to kind of withdraw from staking, right? But no one's like up in arms about it, being like, oh my God, I'm so excited that withdrawals are coming. Unless they plan to sell. Maybe they're excited they're finally going to be able to sell their ETH. I don't know. But yeah, it's a different kind of excitement, right? Whereas with the 4844, every single person is going to be affected by this because of the fact that if you're using something on a layer 2, your costs are most likely, if not certainly, depending if these rollups are congested at the time, which I don't think they will be, but your costs of doing transactions is going to come down dramatically. And it's just a super exciting thing coming to the network. So, and that is the most exciting near-term thing after the merge. Like, obviously, there are other upgrades coming. Obviously, there are other upgrades coming in the longer term too. But in terms of like ones that to kind of like be excited about post-merge or immediately post-merge would be proto-danksharding. That's for sure. All right, speaking of, I guess, like Optimism Bedrock, Smart Contracts here, or Calvin Fichter, put together a great thread about the Optimism Bedrock upgrade itself, rollup decentralization, and ZK. And then he said something here where he goes, Bedrock is a rollup client, not an optimistic rollup client. So again, hinting at the fact that Optimism has been working on ZK stuff. Stephen Goldfeder from Arbitrum did a similar thread last week hinting at that Arbitrum has been working on ZK stuff as well. And I think Nitro is kind of like in the same vein as that, the same as kind of Bedrock. But I thought that was funny because so many people for so long thought, oh my God, these optimistic rollups are so obsolete, because ZK rollups are coming. And I said for the longest time that when ZK Tech is ready, it's not ready today, but when it is ready, the optimistic rollup teams are going to be there and going to adopt that technology. They're not going to be like, I guess, what's the term I'm looking for? They're not going to be stubborn about it. They're not going to be like, oh my God, no, my technology is best. We spent so long kind of building this stuff. We're not going to just abandon it. We're going to stick with this. No, that's not how the Ethereum ecosystem works. Maybe it's how the Bitcoin ecosystem works, where they're so stubborn about changing anything. But that's never been the Ethereum ecosystem. That's never been the way kind of like Ethereum does things. And I think that expands to layer 2s as well. So that's why you're not going to see these optimistic rollup teams go down with the ship, so to speak, if it turns out that ZK gives us all the benefits that it's promised to give us. It gives us all that kind of like extra scale, better cryptographic security and guarantees and everything like that. Well, then they're just going to use that. And that's why they're building for those kind of like upgrades in the future by building stuff like Bedrock and Nitro. So I thought this was a great thread kind of going through that more. You should definitely give this thread a read. But there was one other tweet that I wanted to highlight here from Kelvin. If I can find it in his thread, which one was it? Where he says, there's no reason why Bedrock can't use a ZK proof system instead. We think optimistic rollups currently have massive advantages over their ZK counterparts, but Bedrock has been designed to make a seamless transition between optimistic and ZK possible. I can't even say it any clearer than this, guys. This is very clear proof from someone who works at Optimism, right? Saying that Bedrock has been designed with kind of like future-proof in mind, and there's no reason why a seamless transition between optimistic rollup, which is what Optimism is today, and turning it into a ZK rollup in the future can't happen. It's going to happen if ZK stuff gets to that point, which I think it will, but we don't know when, but it will get to that point, which I think is just absolutely awesome. I love seeing this because the worst thing and the thing that I've always worried about when it comes to Ethereum, and I don't worry about it as much these days, but I used to worry about it a lot more, maybe in 2018, 2019, when the proof of stake kind of roadmap was in flux. I used to worry a lot about Ethereum getting stuck, getting ossified too early and not being able to do upgrades, both at, layer 1 and layer 2. And layer 2, actually, I was worried about that and probably until maybe early 2020 until I started seeing a lot more action here. We did see action in 2019 with Optimism coming to the scene and kind of doing their Unipig demo and stuff like that. But, I still kind of was what's going on here? Right, it was still a little bit in flux, but then it all came together. And over the last couple of years, I haven't really felt that. I felt like Ethereum is in the best place it's ever been in terms of kind of pushing updates out. Even though they may take longer than we would like, there's still stuff getting done, right? And there's still a lot of things being researched in parallel, developed in parallel. And the same is true for layer 2s, if not more so for layer 2s, because they can move faster than layer 1, obviously. So, as I said, I used to be worried about it a lot, especially during 2018, 2019. And I don't think it was just price influencing my concern back then, because I didn't really care about price. But I was just concerned about the fact that 2017 had a lot of hype around, obviously, people thought proof of stake was going to come that year. There was some layer 2 scaling like Raiden with state channels and stuff like that. And there was Plasma. But then it all kind of fizzled away, and we were in no man's land for a little bit in 18 and 19, and then I think in kind of 19 we started coming together with a little bit of stuff, and then in 2020 we really came together with DeFi summer and DeFi just taking off, and obviously the bull market coming back and making kind of DeFi such a wild ecosystem. But we also saw the beginnings of a really vibrant layer 2 ecosystem coming online. That continued into 2021 and has basically reached critical mass in 2022, where there's no signs of it slowing down at all. And I would know this because I've been doing the Daily Gwei kind of refuel since late 2020, and I've been doing the newsletter since mid 2020. So I've been covering this every single day. So I think that I'm maybe one of the kind of best people and most in tune people in the ecosystem in terms of being able to notice shifts in kind of what's happening across the ecosystem, because I just pay so much attention to it. And other people that can kind of pick up on this as well, such as the guys from Bankless. They're very close to the metal. I've spoken to them about this too, and they basically agree with me. It's just it's crazy to think that we were so optimistic about Ethereum in 2018 and 2019 and Ethereum development, when in reality, looking back now, there wasn't really that much to be optimistic about, right? Like it was kind of some sort of blind kind of optimism to an extent, but I don't think that's been the case since early 2020. I think since then, we've really, really taken off as an ecosystem, and there's just no signs of slowing down. Anyway, a little bit off kind of like a tangent there, a little bit off topic, but I think it does fit into what is said here. But I'll link Calvin's thread in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, so speaking of layer 2s, Vitalik had an interesting tweet here where he quote tweeted Calvin's tweet and said, here's a hybrid idea, optimistic plus ZK, governance only adjudicates bugs between the two. Man, I can't say that word. People are going to make fun of me for that. And then Vitalik continues by saying, number 1, publish block, wait 24 hours for fraud challenges. If no challenge, publish ZK snark, finalize. If there is a challenge, decide based on 2 of 3 of a challenge game, ZK snark, governance. I've said before that the only reason optimistic rollups have a 7-day kind of fraud dispute period is arbitrary. It is not a strict rule of the system. I actually think that in theory, optimistic rollups could have a 1 block fraud kind of proof system. But the problem is that the whole point is that you want to be able to detect fraud in kind of like in a way that gives enough people enough time to detect it. Like you obviously probably can't detect it in 1 block, but maybe you could do it in an hour, for example. Maybe you could have a kind of like a challenge game run in an hour with the fraud proof system and kind of like get that all sorted out there. But Vitalik's idea here is to kind of like make a hybrid of that, right? Get your optimistic kind of like challenge game, have governance and have ZK stuff, but only use 2 of 3 of them in case of a challenge, right? So you could use a challenge game and governance, or you can use challenge game and ZK snark, or you could use ZK snark and governance, and so on and so forth, right? So I think that's a cool idea. I don't know if someone's going to do this in practice. I don't like, from all the concern trolling around 7-day withdrawal periods, I don't think anyone's really cared that much because we have so many bridging protocols now and so many protocols that allow you to do fast exits and stuff like that. But on top of that, as these layer 2 ecosystems become more and more developed, right, and more and more people go on there, more and more liquidity kind of gets on there, more and more of an ecosystem gets built out, I think people aren't going to care about withdrawing off of these things, right? They're not going to care about offboarding onto layer 1 Ethereum from layer 2 because like layer 1 Ethereum probably isn't going to be a place where there is much for them to do. And on top of that, if they're going to go to fiat, well, they can just go to a centralized exchange, direct L2 to centralized exchange L2 and have their deposit credited in the same amount of time it will take a normal L1 deposit to be credited. So I don't know if anyone's going to build this. It is cool to think about, but yeah, for all the concern trolling around the kind of like 7-day withdrawal period, I haven't personally seen anyone really complaining about it, but still a cool idea. There's a bit of comments and discussion in the thread here from Vitalik. I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to check out. All right, so Scroll's got another tweet thread / blog post out today, kind of describing the architecture of Scroll. So they say, in this post, we take a deeper dive into Scroll's overall architecture, which in its initial state is composed of a centralized sequencing node and decentralized proving network. So you can check out this blog post for full details on that and this thread here for basically a TLDR. But yeah, I'm loving these things from Scroll. Like I actually really love when teams kind of put out, I guess bite-sized is relative definition, but like they kind of like put out constant, what am I saying here? Constant education around their own kind of like architectures and other things around kind of like what they're building for people to kind of like digest as time goes on. Now, as I said, this is relatively bite-sized. I mean, this shouldn't take you too long to read. It wouldn't even take you 5 minutes to read this. Maybe understanding it would take a bit longer, but basically I love these sorts of things because obviously I love learning, but I love learning about things on the bleeding edge as well, and in such a simple way, and as simple way as possible. I think is a really great way to kind of like get people on board with your mission, get people to join your community, get people to be more involved. And that's exactly what Scroll has been doing with all of these educational posts that they've been putting out, I guess, over the last few months. So I look forward to them continuing to do this. I'm super excited to keep reading them, but I'll link this one in the YouTube description for you to check out. Just wanted to put it on your radar in case you missed it. All right, finally here we have an announcement from Stateful Works where they announced something called the New Home of the Heart, which is an NFT benefit sale for the Ethereum core devs working on the merge. This is being curated and organized by SW, JPEG, and Sofia Garcia here. So I don't think this is the official merge NFT. I think this is just another thing that's happening, another NFT that's kind of like happening. As I said, it's called New Home of the Heart, which is a benefit NFT sale. But I think there's going to be a separate kind of like an official merge NFT, kind of like what we had for EIP 1559, but that hasn't been announced yet from what I've seen. But yeah, you can read the full details of what this is in this very, very short blog post. This is actually bite-sized blog post here if you want to know how to get involved with that. And there's also a Twitter thread for an even shorter view here. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of like clarify that I don't think this is the official merge NFT. This is just another kind of initiative going on. And the proceeds from this sale are going to core devs working directly on the merge, which is always a fun and good thing there. So very, very excited about that. Definitely check it out if you haven't yet. All right, I have got a few minutes left here. Today's kind of like end of episode topic. I have something that I kind of like was thinking about over the weekend that I wanted to talk more about today, but there is a funny kind of like phenomenon that I've noticed being in crypto like a fair few cycles now. I mean, my first crypto foray was 2013 with Bitcoin. I stuck around for a bit in 2014, but didn't really stick around in 2015 and 2016. But technically, I've been a part of like 3 of these crypto market cycles now. The 2013 cycle, 2017, and 2020/2021 cycle. And the kind of thing that always strikes me about them is that it's always the same. Like, you might think it's different. You might think, oh, this time is different, but it is always the same. And I'm not just talking about the market action. The market action obviously drives the cycle itself. But in terms of kind of like, we have like this massive influx of users come in, right? Then obviously they come with money, the prices go up, blah, 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 things get heated, things get crazy, there's all these new narratives flying around, there's all these, oh my God, you know, this time is different, everything's going to be amazing, we're going to get mass adoption any day now, blah, blah, like all that sorts of stuff, right? And to an extent, there's always like a new narrative that pops up too. Like in 2017, it was ICOs. In 2013, Ethereum wasn't around, but there was kind of like this Bitcoin narrative that spawned after Silk Road was shut down. That brought a lot of attention onto Bitcoin. And then in 2020/2021, well, 2020 was DeFi. 2020, and I think Bitcoin institutional adoption was a bit of a narrative, or probably a lot of a narrative in 2020 as well. Then 2021, we had like NFT stuff, a lot of NFT stuff going on. We had kind of like the Altal 1 stuff as well going on. And I think kind of like that ended us out for the year at about November. We kind of like peaked there, right? So it's kind of funny how we always have something different that doesn't really kind of like map to what we had before. Like there was not really any ICOs in 2020/2021, right? Like there were token sales, but it wasn't the main theme. It wasn't something that was capturing everyone's attention like it did in 2017. And there was really barely any talk of kind of like anything related to drug markets or anything related to Silk Road in 2017, for example, right? And then we had like NFTs and DeFi this cycle. So I wonder if in the next cycle, is that still going to be a major theme? I think it will. I don't know if we're ever going to get a full repeat of DeFi Summer. I don't think that's going to happen because DeFi Summer happened in like probably half of the reason why it happened the way it did was because it was so new for a lot of people and it was just kind of like a once-off kind of thing where it captured a lot of people's attention. But all the OGs are pretty much like, I guess, bored of that sort of stuff in the sense that they've already experienced that a lot of times. It's kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. It's kind of like liquidity incentives, yield farming. We've done all that before. Who cares, right? NFTs is a broad topic. I think NFTs is going to be persistent, but I'm thinking like, are these things going to be the main focus of the next cycle? Like, is there going to be something else driving this? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it as well, guys, but I think that there will be. But I kind of like think that the DeFi and NFT ecosystems are so strong and there's so much of a kind of like addressable market there and they're kind of like, they can be sustainable that I think they're going to be part of us for many, many cycles to come. I think they're going to bring us to kind of like mainstream adoption, but is it going to be the main thing of the next cycle? I don't think so. I think we'll have something new. Maybe I can't pick what it is, but it might be layer 2s. Like maybe everyone gets like super excited about layer 2s instead of layer 1s this time, and that becomes a thing. Or maybe there's something else that I haven't even thought of. Maybe for some reason someone figures out a way to do DAOs in some way that gets people excited about it. I don't know, right? But from my experience, it's always a funny kind of phenomenon. How there's always been like this major theme, and there hasn't really been overlap in those themes. There's been similarities, sort of, but it's kind of like been a totally new thing where everyone's always been like, this time is different. And that's what kind of like leads us to these super speculative bubbles that have those blow off tops, because it's just a kind of like euphoria phase. It's a new paradigm phase. So I'm curious what happens next cycle and what kind of like leads us there next cycle. But yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well. So definitely comment on YouTube if you've got any thoughts, but also in the Discord channel as well. But I think that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.